Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Okay, we're back, and one of the things that we've been doing here on Focus Today is talking to local pastors and just kind of get the feel for what God's telling them and where they're going with their work. And delighted to have two pastors in the church today. One's a pester. The other one's a pastor, and I'll let you guys figure out which one is which. No, delighted to have my good buddy back with me, Ron Timen. He's the pastor, but no, I love this guy. And he pastors Rivergate House of Prayer, and Living Praise pastor Lyle King's with us. And good to see you guys. How you doing?
Really good. Good to see you.
Ron and I go way
Pastor,
back.
Yeah.
How far?
You know, I was thinking
30 years?
This is Pastor Lyle's first time in the studio here with you.
Right.
And I'm thinking one of the first times I was in the theDove studio was when it was still at Faith Tabernacle.
Oh, gee, that's 30
and
years
then
ago.
We moved to by the Ashland Shopping Center near the Daily Tidings.
Yeah.
And then by the Quick Mart.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got them all down.
I've been traveling with you.
Yeah. Good to see you
like
guys.
The Israelites.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Well, thank you both for coming in. You know, we've had a variety of pastors in over the last couple of months. And what's so interesting is that there seems to be a theme. And I won't tell you what it is because I want to see what the Lord's telling you guys. Okay. But there seems to be a theme of something that's happening here in Southern Oregon among pastors. And so let me start with you. Lyle, good to see you. Welcome. You've been about 2 years now, 2.5 years.
Yes.
And Living Praise out on Table Rock Road, beautiful facility. What's the Lord telling you these days?
Well, for myself personally, I've just had an increased hunger for God. Just I feel more dependent on God than I've ever felt. I think we should all feel that way, but I'm just in a place where I'm looking to Him more and more. I feel like I just need His presence on a daily basis. When it comes to the church, I feel that I keep thinking about the Old Testament. We seem to be living, to me, in our nation now. People have differing opinions, but I seem to be living in a nation that's in the throes of judgment. And I'm reading the Old Testament stories, and God's people have been through that same scenario before, living in a nation that was in suffering judgment because of sin and disobedience. But at the same time, God kept them through the midst of it. I think about Jeremiah. He prophesied some of the things, but lived actually through some of the things that happened to him, and yet God kept him through all of it. He wasn't taken into exile. Now he got thrown into a pit, and he had some troubles, but God kept him through all of that. And I believe that even in this time, with whatever judgments may be coming upon the nation because of disobedience, God can keep His people in the midst of it. And that to me is tremendously hopeful.
Well, that is a great promise, and I think a great point, because a lot of people are giving up on America, and in doing so, they're kind of saying, they're just kind of hunkering down, saying, waiting for Jesus to return and not doing anything. So this is our busiest day.
Yes.
Ron, how about you? What's the Lord telling you these days?
Well, one of the words for us personally has been the word jubilee. With our own building, our building was built 50 years ago.
Really?
So Jubilee is a pretty significant event in the scriptures, canceling of debts, getting set free. So it's like, it's a new day. Wow. You know, all the chains come off and we're free. Yeah. I think I read that in the Bible. Yeah. It was for freedom that Christ came.
Right, right.
And so sometimes we're really quick to put some kind of chains back on us, but Jesus wants us to be free.
You know, you have also have been called to a prayer ministry. You do a lot of that.
Yes.
Update us on that.
Well, we've morphed into a house of prayer, so we've just upped a lot of the opportunities for people to come in for prayer. This morning, I skipped the morning prayer to be here. And we have prayer sets for Israel, so we do focus on Israel throughout the month. We even have a Messianic Shabbat, and then we follow that with prayer for Israel. So different sets throughout the week, and then lots of training, praying through the scriptures, praying apostolic prayers. So the fun thing is it's gone to the next generation. So both of my daughters are in-house, and so they're picking it up, and amazing and gifted teachers.
Wow.
rocking it.
That's wonderful. You alluded to it, Lyle, and of course you have too, Ron. The big question, I don't know how we qualify it, but do you think we're in the last days?
I personally believe we are. Yeah. I don't know where we're at in the last days, but I believe we are, yes.
I mean, we can't look around and see wars, rumors of wars. Earthquakes are all over the place. We got national disasters. And something that's happening right smack in our face that we're having a hard time digesting. It appears that we, America, turning our back on Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever thought this would happen?
That's at a national level,
right,
within the presidency. It
right.
seems like the Congress is opening their arms to Israel. So
right.
we have a dichotomy throughout our country, and we have large numbers of believers that love Israel, but then there are segments within even the church that are, pushing for divestment and not supporting Israel.
So where is that in your thinking on some kind of a prophetic time clock?
Well, Israel appears to be God's calendar and time clock, and it's definitely ticking. I look at Isaiah 60, and it speaks of the arise and shine, for your light has come. The glory of the Lord will rise upon you. Mm-hmm. So a rising light on believers, those are actively pursuing God. But at the same time, it says darkness, and some versions say gross darkness will come upon the earth. So I think we're moving into that time where the gray is beginning to diminish, and it's kind of black or white, the light or the dark, and we see the dark seems to be getting darker when you look at what ISIS has been doing.
Right.
We thought Al-Qaeda was bad, and then we see what ISIS is doing. Yeah. So it takes it to a whole other level, and then it can go to another level from that. I mean, dark gets darker.
I like what you said, Lyle, and that is, and I think you give the message of hope in the middle of all this, that God takes care of his people, even though the country is going in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. If you're faithful as a person, if you're faithful as a church, God takes care of you.
Yeah. When you were speaking of Israel, I was thinking it's brought a change in me. I grieve personally over the current administration in our nation, the apparent position that they have of a lack of support for Israel, and most recently with the Prime Minister of Israel coming, but the President choosing not to meet with him. All of those things bother me, but I had a change or a shift in my thinking. A few years ago, I had the privilege of ministering in Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim nation by population, and meeting with quite a few pastors. In fact, we went there to help teach a pastor's conference. And the thing that struck me while I was there, Indonesia, when you look at it demographically and financially, they make a lot less money per capita than we do. And yet I talked to so many pastors who had been to Israel. And I was curious about it because I thought, well, they make a lot less money, and yet so many of them have traveled to Israel and visited the Holy Land. And I thought, so I began to speak and ask a pastor a question about that. How come? And he said that they were intentional because their nation politically did not support Israel, being a Muslim nation and against Israel. He said, as the church, we have chosen and been very intentional about aligning ourselves and supporting Israel. That's why so many pastors had gone. And so that brought a change in me. So when I came back, I just purposed in my heart more and more that as an individual and as a believer, I'm going to support Israel. So I looked up a ministry and began to support Israel directly, like financially, to bless them, in a way to bless them as an individual. Even if my nation won't align with it, I can.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing that. You know what? And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he decided to run for Prime Minister again, his primary support to get elected came from churches in the United States. Mm-hmm. He made the circuit within the faith community in the United States, raised a ton of money, goes over there. He is certainly God's man for the hour. He gets it. But we're living in some interesting times. I don't know, are both you gentlemen sensing within your congregation, your congregants are overwhelmed with life?
That can be a theme. For sure. This information age that we live in, there's that constant bombardment. One of the things that I was thinking too is just there's such a narrative in our country that seems to be anti-church, anti-God, and it begins to bleed, I think, even into segments of the body of Christ. Yeah. I saw this, you know, I do read Facebook posts now and then, and there's one about the church, and it says the church should be churchy. We shouldn't be embarrassed to be the church. You know, there seems to be some voices like, we're so apologetic for being who we are, and we don't want to mention words like blood or sin or judgment, you know, and we need to be happy and unoffensive. And they likened it to if you went into a donut shop. A donut shop is never called too donut-y for selling donuts. People don't seem to be offended when they get that jelly donut. But if you were to go in and say, well, where's my vegan salad? Yeah. I'm so, you know, and so when we come into church and we're praying and we're worshiping and we're, you know, releasing the presence of God, I think that's supposed to be a good thing. I think that means we're doing what we're called to do.
And come out from among them and be separate. All right, you got an event coming up. And,
we do.
We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. I want him to unload on that and give us some information. And again, quickly, Lyle, your service times on Sunday are?
10:30 in the morning and 6 in the evening on Sunday.
Okay, Living Praise out on Table Rock, and the Rivergate House of Prayer in Ashland.
We're at 10:30 in the morning on Sunday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Friday morning and Friday night, and there we go.
You'll find some coffee over there, I'm sure.
Lots of coffee.
Okay, we'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and delighted to have in the studio with us today Pastor Ron Timen. He is pastor of the Rivergate House of Prayer in Ashland, and Living Praise Pastor Lyle King. And we're just, John here, continuing on with our interviews of local pastors. You guys got an event coming on.
We do.
What's it about?
Well, we, several of us pastors have been getting together the last 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. Pastor Mickelson over at New Song kind of helped to convene this. And so we get together once a month and we just have a great time of prayer and fellowship together. And we sensed that it was time to take it to another level and do something together. And so each year we're going to swap locations and bring a speaker in just to encourage our churches to come together and grow some unity in the body of Christ in the Rogue Valley.
Great. And your first one's coming up in February.
First one's coming up, and we have a speaker named Steve Backlund who comes up out of Reading. He's based out of the church at Bethel Church in Reading. And he has a great ministry. It would be typified, I think, by one of the first books he wrote is called Let's Just Laugh at That, where he takes a bunch of lies the devil throws at us, puts it up against the light of Scripture, and then releases decrees and declarations we can make to just counter that kind of influence in our lives.
Boy, that's encouraging.
So it's fun. So the goal of this is twofold. One, the evening services are open to everybody. So it'll be a great time just to come together, worship, praise, great word, great message, lots of encouragement. Then Friday during the day, we'll have like 3 sessions for anyone in church leadership to just come. Steve will share. We'll have a lunch with a Q&A time. He'll have a couple of teaching sessions. And the goal is Igniting Hope. That's the name of his ministry. And we just said, well, that's the name of this conference. Okay. Because we all need a fresh infusion of hope. Yeah.
All right, so it's coming up February 5 and 6. Mm-hmm. It'll be held at the Rivergate, and you can call you over there, I guess, right, Ron?
Sure.
And get a hold of that. A little registration fee for the seminars during the day, and then, of course, the services at night. That's wonderful. Great. I'm going to ask you guys a question I've asked every pastor that's come in here. So I'll start with you, Lyle. Okay. How do you balance evangelism and shepherding?
Unpack that for me. What do you mean by that?
Well, that's great. Throw it back at me. That's a good guy. You're going to run you for office.
He's rabbinic. Very rabbinic. Answer a question with a question.
No, here's the situation, and the reason I ask that question. I think in the heart of every pastor, you want your church to grow. Mm-hmm. That means evangelism. You got to do something to bring them in, and you don't want to just be church hopping people around the valley. We have enough of that going on, but winning the lost and the hurting and getting them into the church. At the same time, your own church requires a lot of shepherding. The people need to be, you know, taken care of. And the reason I ask that question is because we here at the Dove have done several prayer days where we had people call in. When we got done with that, and several hundred each time we've done that, we would ask various questions. One of them is, what church do you attend? The other question is, have you talked to your pastor? And here's what we found out with all the prayer requests that came in. Two things. The reason they called us for prayer and not the pastor was primarily because, A, they didn't see their pastor as somebody they could get to.
Wow.
That he was the pastor or he was the teacher. Even though he's the shepherd, I couldn't touch him because that's all he does. I have all these other people around him that will take care of my need. But I want to talk to the main guy, and I couldn't get to him. Or two, the other reason was they didn't want their pastor to know they were in trouble, so they called us.
Wow.
All right, so that produces the question, how do you balance evangelism, getting new people in, and yet taking care of the flock?
Well, my personal view on this, boy, your response stirs up a lot of things for me. But well, I would say this, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I would say healthy things grow. So as we focus on the local church becoming healthy, the individual members, I believe that a natural byproduct of that is that they reproduce. If you're into farming, or if your livestock is healthy, it will reproduce. And if it's not reproducing, there's a problem. There's a lack of health issue in some way. I believe that's true spiritually. And so when you focus on that, and a part of the issue I believe is aloneness. People, like in Genesis chapter 2. Before sin ever entered, in chapter 3 we get sin, there's a big problem, and we all deal with it today. But in chapter 2, before sin ever happened, there was a problem with man, and it was aloneness. When God created man, He said, it's not good. Something was not good. And when you stop and think about it, it was because they were alone. And I think we see that still today in the church. There's aloneness. People, you can be in a room full of people and be alone. So we need to learn to care for, to love one another better, to function in that great commandment. And but as we do that, and then there's health, I believe there's a natural flow of it. I believe that every believer is called to the ministry of reconciliation. I believe my job as a pastor is not to see people saved. My job, according to Ephesians chapter 4, is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. And part of that work of the ministry is that ministry of reconciliation, so that when they get healthy and spirit, and I can equip them to minister, then they go out and they win the lost. They minister to people that are lonely and hurting, and their response is to come to Jesus.
Healthy sheep produce healthy sheep.
Yeah.
There you go.
So
Can you add to that?
So good. I really, you can't. I like what Arthur Wallace talked about, divine magnetism, where the presence of God begins to build in the house of God, and people are just drawn in. So there is a supernatural element to that we need to contend for as well.
Because I think there's a genuine and I think a right motive to go outside the church and win people and do what we can to bring them in, but not at the cost of the sheep that's already in the flock suffering. You know,
Right.
You got to remember Jesus left the 99 and went and got the one. I mean, he was very concerned about that one. And the reason I bring that up today because we're all dealing with these pressures today, and it comes down to, is the church delivering the goods? Do they walk into our buildings and literally feel something supernatural? We talk about it, we preach it. Do they experience it? Do they experience the supernatural divine presence of God when they walk into this place of gathering? Could be in a barn, could be anywhere, but as long as 2 or 3 are gathered, there he is.
Right,
Do they experience that? And then the other part of that is, I'm beginning to think now, we got to see some miracles. And look, there's a miracle every day going on out there. Somebody's getting saved, something's happening. But you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Where I've been stuck in the book of Acts for about 2 months now in my personal reading. And most of these guys got thrown in the clink for doing miracles.
Doing miracles.
You know, and I'm going, okay, what is that?
Yeah.
And can it happen today?
Well, we have, there is a book written about the Islamic invasion, talking about a clash of civilizations.
Right.
We have a clash of kingdoms. We have the kingdom of God and an Antichrist kingdom. And what we're called to do is reach into that kingdom, much of which is invisible still. Mm-hmm. It's still in that realm of the Spirit. But we're called to reach into that realm of the Spirit and bring that power, that reality into our present reality. At a point in the hopefully not distant future, that kingdom is going to break in and we'll have the reuniting of heaven and earth. You know, I believe, like as Pastor Lyle was talking about in the garden, we had a wonderful unity of the spiritual and the natural. And sin came in and kind of ripped things apart. And so now God's doing everything he can to bring them together. So we'll have the natural Jerusalem, we'll have the heavenly Jerusalem, and here comes the reality, and here comes the power and the wonder, and this is what we've all been waiting for. But right now it's still invisible. We're still reaching into that, bringing it here. But that creates conflict, because then that threatens the kingdom of darkness.
We can get into theological discussions and take up about 10 days here, but it depends on how you, I guess, personally interpret things. But aren't we heading into some kind of a last day harvest before there is a overwhelming judgment? And the reason I ask that is a lot of Christians are saying, oh, well, why bother doing anything? Jesus is coming Friday at 4, and all this nonsense and wreck out there is part of his plan. And they just kind of folded their hands and sit down and waiting for something supernatural or catastrophic to occur.
Right.
But I see it as a field white unto harvest. So I don't know. Am I?
Well, the signs seem to be there. If we look at especially what we call third world countries, there's a massive harvest. When you just look, for example, at Africa and see what's happening there, it's a lot of cause for rejoicing. There's wonderful things happening. And I think it's going to come to a country near us very soon.
You think America can have a revival again?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I see no reason why not.
You don't think we'll Madison Avenue it and try to merchandise it? And
well,
how's it going? Can we keep our hands off
happen,
of it? Go ahead, Lyle. You're itching.
Yeah, well, hey, I look at it this way. I've thought a lot about it. I've prayed a lot about it. My heart longs for a renewal. America experienced a first Great Awakening, and then we experienced a second Great Awakening, and I say we can have a third Great Awakening. Why not? Why not? God did it before when it looks really dark, but I also believe that it could look very different than what we might expect in our mind. I believe that we could have a third Great Awakening, but it could come in the midst of economic collapse. See, but when the God that people have, their God with a small g, money, the security of whatever, their stocks in the future, when that disappears, the only thing that's left is to call upon the living God. And there could be a tremendous revival in the midst of great natural difficulty. And that's, I speculate about that.
Good stuff. There's a generational science book that deals with fourth turning, and without getting too wrapped up in it, it appears America is in a fourth turning right now, which basically everything's upside down. But it's not as if we haven't seen this before. Yeah. We have seen this before, and right after a fourth turning, there's usually a great awakening, you know, because people realize, well, wait a minute, maybe I ought to give this God thing a try. Everything else seems to be falling apart. When we survey things here, it comes down to two questions. Number one, what is truth? And number two, who can I trust? If that isn't the church's golden hour, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So,
well, I also think, even in my lifetime, look, when I look around, sometimes you feel overwhelmed. You watch the 6 o'clock news, and there seems to be so much evil and negative going on, and everything seems to be going downhill. But I think about in the 60s, when everything was turned upside down, and the sexual revolution, and on all the Eastern religions that swept in through the Beatles and all that stuff. But then in the midst of that, the Jesus movement. And it seems like 1970, the Spirit of the Lord just swept across North America. I've talked to so many people that got saved in 1970 or even around that time. That seemed to be, to me, the kind of the peak of the wave. And you think, well, God can do that again. In the midst of evil, God can overwhelm by His Spirit instead of an overwhelming of evil.
Good stuff. You want to add to that?
Well, we have one of the ministries we have goes into New Age festivals, and we set up booths in the midst of a New Age festival and have a little menu board, and people can choose what they'd like dream interpretation, spiritual blessing, mother-father blessing, spiritual cleansing, etc. And we find that we become like the draw. We have people
I'm laughing
waiting.
because only Ron could pull this off.
Hey,
Yeah, that's right.
That's wonderful.
it's so great.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is there's a little like spillover during the year. Most of these festivals are like in the summertime, but people, a lot of them still live here in Ashland. And so we have people coming in on a monthly basis, and they'll come in and have these encounters. And sometimes, sometimes Jesus gets brought in overtly, sometimes covertly, but they encounter the love of God. That's the number one thing we go in with.
That's wonderful.
Our goal is, was this person encountered by love, the Spirit of love, which is God. God is love. And if they have been encountered with that, something is going to happen. Then it triggers things. And how many times they'll come in, I had this dream, and there was this man, and he was dressed in white, and his eyes were just so full of love. Do you think it could have been Jesus?
Wow. All right, guys, I'm out of time, but let me just say February 5th and 6th, they're going to have their conference. Get a hold of Pastor Ron at Rivergate there in Ashland and get signed up for it. Lyle, good to see you. And Lyle King with Living Praise and Pastor Ron Timen with Rivergate House of Prayer. Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Inspiring.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. All right.
All right.
We'll be right back. All right.